Welcome to the halfway dark.
The package that wasn't mine. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the package arrived. No knock at the door, no delivery truck outside, just a plain cardboard box sitting neatly on my welcome mat, as if it had always belonged there. I assumed it was a mistake. My name wasn't written anywhere. No label, no barcode, no return address. Just a box sealed carefully with heavy tape, edges sharp, corners perfectly squared, too deliberate to be random. I left it untouched for hours. Curiosity burned, but unease weighed heavier. Finally, when the silence pressed too thickly, I brought it inside. The box was strangely heavy, but not in a way that made sense. It didn't shift when tilted. When I finally cut it open, I froze. Inside lay a notebook. Plain, black, unmarked. No brand, no indication of use, except my own handwriting scrawled across the cover. Things you haven't done yet. My chest tightened. I flipped it open. The first page listed simple things. Buy milk. Call mom. Clean kitchen. All tasks I had indeed planned to do today. But I hadn't written this notebook. I knew that for certain. The second page was stranger. Drop glass, cut finger. Watch blood bead before sink drains it. I blinked. A chill shot down my spine. Moments later, I heard a crash. The glass I had left near the edge of the counter shattered. My hand bled. The notebook continued. Each page described events slightly ahead of my present, things that hadn't happened yet. Each one came true, in exact order, no matter what I tried to avoid or alter. The handwriting remained undeniably mine. I locked the notebook away, deep in a drawer, determined not to look again. But the next morning, another box appeared. Same shape, same seal, waiting on my doormat. My pulse quickened as I brought it inside. Inside was another notebook. Different cover, same concept. The title scrawled in my handwriting. Things You Won't Admit. I flipped it open, dread pressing on me like lead. The pages revealed secrets, thoughts I'd buried, things I'd never confessed aloud, embarrassments, shams, regrets, even things I had never consciously admitted to myself. Every page bled with my private life. I slammed it shut. The hum of my apartment thickened, as if the walls themselves vibrated in quiet laughter. I placed the second notebook beside the first, determined not to feed into the madness. Yet I couldn't sleep. The third morning, another package appeared. Same size, same weight. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, a notebook labeled Things You Will See. Its pages depicted scenes and rough sketches. Crude yet recognizable. My hallway, my bathroom, the chair I was sitting in as I flipped the pages. Each drawing included a figure, sometimes blurred, sometimes clearer, standing just behind me. I dropped the notebook, spinning around. Empty. The chair creaked beneath me. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Too long, too distorted for the single lamp. My breath came sharp, uneven. The notebooks weren't just predicting. They were shaping. I tried throwing them away. I bagged all three, marched them to the dumpster, and hurled them inside. Relief washed over me as I walked back. But when I reached my door, another package waited, identical, patient. Inside, another notebook. Things You Will Lose. I almost didn't open it, but I did. The pages listed everything precious to me. Friends, photographs, memories. Each entry marked with a date. The first said, Friday, your keys. And that Friday, my keys vanished. I tore apart the apartment. Nothing. Days later, more items vanished. My wallet, my favorite jacket, the book my grandmother gave me. Each one matched perfectly with the notebook's predictions. And then, more terrifyingly, names appeared. People I loved. I stopped going outside. My world shrank to the walls of my apartment. But even within that confinement, The packages arrived, relentless. No matter how tightly I locked the door, no matter how carefully I watched, they were always waiting. The next notebook read, "Things You Will Forget." Pages erased themselves as I stared, memories vanishing from my mind in real time. Birthdays, faces, street names. Entire years dissolved into fog, leaving me gasping, terrified, clinging to scraps of myself. The hum of my apartment grew louder. Shadows leaned toward me in every reflection. I realized the notebooks weren't just predicting or recording, they were feeding. Each page devoured a piece of me, carving away at what I thought I controlled. I tried burning one. Flames caught quickly, paper curling, ink blackening into ash. Relief surged until I opened my fridge later. Inside, stacked neatly, were dozens of new notebooks, each one pristine, each one labeled with handwriting undeniably mine. I screamed, tearing them out, hurling them against the wall. Pages fluttered like wings, scattering words I hadn't yet spoken, moments I hadn't yet lived. My apartment pulsed with a rhythm matching my heartbeat, a steady chant of inevitability. Then one morning, I found a package already inside my apartment, sitting patiently on my table. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't seen anyone enter. The label on this notebook was different, bold, final. Things you won't escape. The first page was blank. The second contained only a single line. "You are writing this now." My vision blurred. My hands shook. I looked down and realized I was holding a pen. The pages filled beneath me, scrawled in handwriting undeniably mine, telling the very story I am recounting. The final page was waiting. I hadn't turned it yet. I'm terrified of what it will say, but I can feel the words already pressing at the edges of my thoughts. My story is no longer mine. The packages haven't stopped. They never will. Each morning, another waits, patient, deliberate. And now, if you're hearing this, it means the notebooks are expanding, reaching beyond my apartment, searching for new hands to write them. If you're still here, subscribe to Halfway Dark. Some packages can't be returned, and sometimes the only way to survive is to open them together. The apartment that wears you. I moved into the apartment on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day that makes the city feel heavy and silent. The building was old but clean, and the rent was suspiciously low. I shrugged, carrying my boxes up the narrow staircase, ignoring the faint hum that seemed to come from the walls. At first, everything seemed normal. I unpacked, arranged my furniture, and set up my kitchen. But the first night, I woke to a subtle shift. My chair, which I had placed perfectly against the table, had moved a few inches. I assumed fatigue, that I had sleepwalked, and tried to ignore it. The next morning, I noticed other changes. Books I had stacked in a particular order were slightly rearranged. A mug I had left on the counter appeared on the floor upright with a faint scratch along its rim. My pulse quickened, though no one could have been inside. By the third day, the apartment began to feel watchful. Shadows lingered longer than they should, and the faint hum seemed more pronounced, almost deliberate. I started noticing patterns. Whenever I moved, the furniture subtly shifted, just a few inches, so it could have been my imagination, except the movements mirrored my actions. I began experimenting. I left a chair in the middle of the room, stood to the left, and returned. It was moved slightly to the right. I sat, moved again, and it shifted in response. The apartment wasn't just alive. It was learning. The nights became unbearable. Every sound, creaks, taps, distant bangs, felt intentional, as if the building itself were breathing around me. Sometimes I caught glimpses in mirrors or reflective surfaces, a shadow slightly out of sync, moving independently, mimicking my posture with a cruel delay. One evening, I set a cup on the counter and stepped back. When I returned, the cup had tilted, positioned as if it were observing me. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But then I noticed my reflection in the window. It didn't match me exactly. Its posture, the tilt of its head, the way it stared, it was wrong. I slept with the lights on. Every corner of the apartment seemed alive. When I showered, the steam clung to the walls, revealing faint handprints where no one could have touched. The air smelled faintly of iron, as if the building were bleeding. By the second week, objects began appearing. Small items I hadn't owned. A pen on the desk, a folded napkin in the kitchen, a single shoe beside my bed. Each object seemed deliberately placed, pointing toward me, waiting for my attention. I tried documenting everything. Photos, videos, sketches. The movements, the items, the subtle distortions of space. But the apartment adapted. Every time I recorded, the objects shifted, the shadows moved differently. It was aware of me, and it wasn't patient anymore. It was studying me. One night, I woke to the sound of whispers. Low, indistinct, incomprehensible. I froze. The temperature dropped sharply, frost forming along the window frame. I dared not move. The whispering continued, growing louder, closer, until it felt as though it were inside my head. I could no longer ignore the furniture. Chairs, tables, cabinets, they no longer stayed in place. They subtly rearranged themselves when I left the room, anticipating my movements, as if practicing my habits. I started feeling like a guest in my own home. Then I noticed the mirrors. My reflection was no longer accurate. At times it lagged behind me. At times it moved independently. Sometimes it smiled before I did, tilted its head in ways I hadn't. And once, it reached toward the edge of the glass with fingers that I didn't move. I tried leaving, packed my bags, stayed with a friend, returned. The apartment waited. Everything returned to its original state, but with subtle differences. Items I hadn't noticed before now lined the counters. Drawers I hadn't opened revealed objects neatly arranged. Spoons, papers, tiny carved figures resembling me. I began leaving small notes around the apartment, marking my movements, attempting to communicate. But the responses were indirect. Chairs tilted differently. A book I left open now faced the wall. A cup I placed upright lay on its side, rim cracked. The apartment was learning my language, my patterns, and adapting faster than I could anticipate. The whispers returned. This time, words formed, faintly, from the low hum that pulsed through the walls. "You are mine." Panic gripped me. I considered calling the police, but how could I explain a living apartment, moving furniture, whispering in its own voice? It would sound insane, and I suspected that mentioning it would only provoke the building further. I began sleeping in shifts, half asleep, half vigilant. Every sound, a creak, a tap, a low groan, put me on edge. The apartment no longer just observed, it interacted. Doors opened slightly when I passed. Drawers shifted toward me. Shadows leaned in, mimicking my posture with uncanny precision. One morning, I awoke to find the living room completely rearranged. Chairs lined the walls, tables angled unnaturally. Every object pointed inward, toward the center of the room. On the floor, a small piece of paper. "We are patient." I realized the apartment wasn't just observing me. It was performing, practicing, shaping itself around my presence. I had become part of its architecture, another component of its strange design. The longer I stayed, the more invasive it became. Objects appeared in places I hadn't put them. Small scratches on the floors mirrored the movements I made in the previous hours. Lamps tilted toward me. Curtains shifted subtly to block or reveal light, and the mirrors never reflected me accurately. The final escalation came one night when I awoke to the unmistakable sound of footsteps in my bedroom. I froze. The room was empty. My bed sheets rustled. My chair moved an inch closer. My reflection grinned before I did. I understand now. The apartment doesn't want me gone. It wants me integrated, observed, cataloged. I can feel it learning me, mapping my movements, mimicking my posture, predicting my habits. Every room, every surface, every shadow has become part of an organism that studies me relentlessly. I write this now as a warning. If you move into a place and begin noticing small shifts, chairs slightly moved, objects appearing, mirrors acting independently, don't dismiss it. The apartment may be alive, and it may already be watching you. If you've read this far, consider subscribing to Halfway Dark. Some presences are patient, and sometimes watching together is the only way to survive when your home is no longer yours. The stranger who walks me home every night. I started noticing him about 3 weeks ago, just after I switched to working the late shift. Midnight walks home became my routine, and at first, I thought the quiet streets were the scariest part. I was wrong. The man appeared behind me the first night, half a block back. Not close enough to make me nervous, but close enough to notice. I told myself he just lived in the same direction. Coincidence. But then it kept happening. Every night, no matter when I left work, he was there. Always falling into step behind me. Always at the same distance. He never spoke. Never crossed the street. I tried ignoring him. Earbuds in, head down, pretending not to see. But the reflection in store windows gave him away. His figure, pale under the yellow streetlights. His movements precise, almost rehearsed. One night, I stopped at a corner store just to test him. I bought a soda, lingered for 10 minutes. When I stepped back outside, he was waiting across the street. Silent. I considered confronting him, but something about the way he stood, stiff, too still, froze the words in my throat. Instead, I walked faster. His pace matched mine perfectly, never gaining, never falling behind. It became unbearable. I told coworkers, but they shrugged it off. Probably some guy with the same commute. They didn't see the way his shadow stretched too far behind him, longer than the streetlights should allow. I tried leaving earlier, later, even sneaking out the back entrance. No matter what, he appeared. Always a half block behind, always with that same unshakable rhythm. One night, I turned a corner sharply and hid in a doorway, holding my breath. When he passed, I saw his face clearly for the first time. It was my face, not similar, not a twin. My exact face, expressionless, staring forward. The same clothes I wore yesterday, the same scuffed shoes, even the same scratch on my jacket sleeve. I stumbled back, nearly choking. When I looked again, he was gone. The street was empty. I barely slept. I told myself I imagined it, a trick of the light. But the next night, he was back and closer. Only a few paces behind me this time. I ran, full sprint down the block, heart hammering. I didn't look back until I reached my apartment door. When I turned, he was standing at the edge of the streetlight, watching. My neighbors didn't believe me. The landlord brushed it off. But I started finding things in my apartment moved, out of place. My toothbrush swapped sides. My shoes turned toward the door. One night, I came home and found an empty soda can on the counter. The same brand I'd bought at the store the night I tested him. I never brought it inside. Another time, my reflection didn't move when I brushed my teeth. Just stared back at me, mouth closed, eyes unblinking, while I went through the motions. When I screamed, it finally caught up. I've tried filming him, but the recordings vanish from my phone. Photos too, like he won't allow evidence. But the fear is real, sharp in my chest with every step I take at night. Now, he doesn't just walk behind me. Sometimes I see him waiting ahead, standing under a flickering street lamp, motionless until I approach. Then he turns and walks, falling into step again. He's learning my habits, my shortcuts. Even when I try a different path, he finds me. Once, I took the bus halfway across town. When I stepped off, he was already there, waiting at the stop. Last night, I came home and found the chain lock on my door, unhooked. I never leave it like that. Inside, my apartment smelled faintly of my cologne, but stronger, fresher, as if someone had just sprayed it. I barely slept, dozing fitfully on the couch. At 3:17 in the morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, deliberate, right outside my door. They stopped, and then a whisper. My voice, it said my name. I pressed my hand over my mouth, forcing myself silent. The footsteps faded, and the air felt colder. When I finally checked, the hallway was empty, but a scrap of paper lay under my door. On it, written in handwriting identical to mine, "Stop running. Let me in." I burned the note, but the ash lingered longer than it should have, clinging to my fingers. The smoke smelled exactly like my apartment. Now, he's closer than ever. Tonight, when I left work, he was only a few feet behind me. Close enough that I heard his breathing, a perfect match to mine. Inhaling when I inhaled, exhaling when I exhaled. When I reached my door, I fumbled with the key, and for the first time, I felt a hand press against my shoulder. Firm, cold. I spun around, and the street was empty. I don't know how long I can keep avoiding him. He's getting bolder, slipping inside when I'm not watching, touching the things I touch, using my voice, wearing my face. And I know what comes next. He doesn't want to follow anymore. He wants to replace me. If one day you see me on the street, walking too still, smiling too wide, don't wave back. It won't be me. Subscribe to Halfway Dark. Just make sure the footsteps behind you aren't in sync with your own. The apartment that rearranges while I sleep. When I first moved into this apartment, I thought I'd finally found a place that felt right. Not perfect, but good enough. Cheap rent, decent neighborhood, and a landlord who didn't ask too many questions. The layout was simple. Living room, small kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. I unpacked quickly, filling the shelves with books, hanging a few pictures, arranging furniture to my liking. It felt cozy, mine. The first night passed without issue. The second, I woke up and noticed something strange. My chair, which I'd left by the window, was now facing the wall. I frowned, assuming I'd forgotten moving it. But then it kept happening. Every morning, something small was different. A mug in the wrong cabinet. A picture frame tilted slightly. My shoes moved from the door to beside the couch. Little things, easy to dismiss. I told myself I was just absent-minded. Maybe I'd done it without remembering. Maybe I was tired. But on the 5th morning, my coffee table had shifted 6 inches to the left. No way I'd done that. I tested it. Before bed, I took pictures of the apartment on my phone. Every angle, every detail. When I woke up, the differences were undeniable. My couch had swapped sides with the rug. The photos proved it. My apartment was rearranging itself while I slept. At first, it was subtle. The salt and pepper shakers reversed. The shower curtain drawn when I knew I'd left it open. The light switch flipped on, glowing faintly at 3 in the morning. When I stumbled past, then it grew bolder. My mattress rotated overnight. My fridge door swung wide open. Entire bookshelves shifted across the room. I began waking up with bruises, as though something brushed past me in the night. I tried staying awake, determined to catch it happening. Coffee, energy drinks, endless YouTube videos. But the moment my eyes grew heavy, the apartment seemed to wait. And when I blinked too long, the changes appeared. Once I swore I saw it mid-shift, my lamp leaning, sliding across the table, inch by inch. The instant I sat up, it froze, perfectly still, as if mocking me. I bought cameras, set them up in every corner, every angle. I fell asleep watching the red lights blink. The next morning, the cameras were gone. Not moved, gone, as though I'd never bought them. I checked my bank account. No purchase history. No record of ordering them. But I remembered unboxing, setting them up, testing the view. The receipts vanished too. My apartment wasn't just rearranging things. It was erasing them. Panic set in. I called a friend, begged him to stay over. He laughed, thought I was joking, but eventually agreed. We drank, talked, and fell asleep on the couch. In the morning, he was gone. His backpack, his shoes, his phone charger, all missing. No note, no sign he'd ever been there. When I called him, his number was disconnected. I checked my contacts. His name was gone. No messages, no photos together. As though he'd been erased too. I stopped inviting people over. I stopped leaving the apartment at all, afraid of what I'd come back to. Every night, the layout shifted more violently. Whole walls seemed to stretch, hallways bending longer. One morning, my bedroom door was gone entirely. Just a wall where it used to be. My bed sat in the middle of the living room. The kitchen counters stretched along the wrong wall. I tried leaving suitcase in hand, but the door opened to a hallway I didn't recognize. Endless, identical doors stretching in both directions. I slammed it shut, heart pounding, and when I opened it again, the hallway was gone. Now the windows show things they shouldn't. Not the street outside, but shifting scenes. A forest, a vast desert, a black ocean, waves rising and crashing against invisible glass. Sometimes faces press close, staring in. I don't know how long I've been here. The clock changes each time I look. My phone shows different dates. Sometimes it's 2025, sometimes 2038, once even 1972. I've stopped trusting it. The apartment won't let me sleep easily anymore. The rearrangements happen even while I'm awake. I'll blink, and suddenly the couch is against the ceiling, or the floor tiles are rippling like water. Last night, the walls closed in, shrinking until I couldn't breathe. I screamed, pressed against them, until they opened again. When I collapsed to the floor, the layout was completely new. A spiral leading nowhere. Now there's a new door. It wasn't there before. Black, heavy, iron. It hums faintly, as though alive. I hear whispers on the other side, calling my name. I think the apartment wants me to open it, to step through. Maybe that's the only way to escape. Maybe that's what it's been rearranging itself for, to funnel me here, to this moment. But I'm afraid. Afraid if I open it, I won't find another room, or another hallway. I'll find the thing that's been moving everything all along, the thing that erased my friend, the thing that wants me next. I don't know how much longer I can resist. The door's closer every time I wake up. Soon, it'll be the only thing left. And when it is, I won't have a choice. Subscribe to Halfway Dark. Just make sure your bedroom door is still there tomorrow morning. The passenger in the back seat, I never picked up. I've always liked driving at night. Roads are emptier, traffic lights blink yellow, and the world feels quieter. There's a comfort in the hum of tires on asphalt, in being cocooned inside my car, moving through the dark. One night, a few weeks ago, I was heading home from work later than usual. The freeway was deserted, empty stretches of blacktop rolling beneath my headlights. I hadn't passed another car in miles. That's when I felt it. The shift. A weight, subtle but undeniable, settling into the back seat. My shoulders tightened instantly. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just shadows and the vague outline of the seats. But the air felt heavier, denser, as though someone sat there. I shook it off, told myself I was tired, imagining things. Still, my hands tightened on the wheel. The hum of the tires suddenly seemed too loud. My pulse beat against my temples. I refused to look back again. When I pulled into my driveway, I exhaled in relief. killed the engine, reached for my bag. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of breathing. Not mine, slow, steady, deliberate, coming from directly behind me. I spun around. Empty seats, just upholstery and shadows. I laughed nervously, more to convince myself than anything. Maybe the sound was the engine cooling, or the air shifting in the vents. I got out quickly, refusing to look back again. The next morning, everything seemed normal. No signs of intrusion, no unlocked doors or broken windows. Just my car, sitting in the driveway like always. By the time I drove to work, I'd almost forgotten the unease. Almost. But that night, it happened again. Driving down another deserted stretch, the shift came suddenly. The undeniable weight of someone sitting in the back seat. I gripped the wheel tighter, refusing to glance at the mirror this time. Then faintly I heard it, the rustle of clothing. A soft scrape, like a shoe brushing against the floor mat. My throat closed. My entire body screamed to stop, to pull over, to look. But I couldn't. Instead, I drove faster, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The sound grew louder, a faint chuckle. Not loud enough to be certain, but unmistakably human. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sound stopped instantly. I didn't turn around, not once. I got out quickly, locked the doors, and ran inside. But through the window, I saw it. Movement. The faintest shadow shifting inside my car. I didn't sleep that night. The image burned behind my eyelids. The following evening, I tried something different. I checked the car thoroughly before leaving. Every seat, every lock, even the trunk, empty. I got in, locked the doors, and started driving. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Just empty roads and the hum of the engine. Relief started to creep in, making me feel foolish. Then, without warning, the shift came again. Heavier this time. Immediate, like someone had dropped suddenly into the back seat. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself not to look. But in the mirror, just at the edge of my vision, something darker than the shadows seemed to move. A shape, a figure, sitting perfectly still. The sound came next. Breathing. Louder now, almost in rhythm with mine, but slightly off. A fraction too slow. When I exhaled, it inhaled. When I paused, it didn't. My hands shook against the wheel. Suddenly, the voice whispered, low, close, right behind my ear. Keep driving. I nearly swerved off the road. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and for the briefest second, I saw it. A pale face, hollow eyes, a smile too wide. Then it was gone. I pulled over, slammed the car into park, and spun around. Empty seats, just shadows. My breath came in ragged gasps, fogging the windows. My chest ached. I didn't drive again for days. When I finally did, I tried daylight. Noon, crowded streets, comfort in traffic and other cars. For a while, it worked. The weight never came. The mirror reflected only what it should. Relief washed over me. But that night, walking past my car in the driveway, I saw something that froze me. A handprint. Clear, pressed against the inside of the rear window. Too large to be mine. I refused to drive after dark for a week. Took buses, walked, did anything to avoid being alone in the car. But eventually, I couldn't avoid it. One late shift forced me back onto the road at night. The moment I merged onto the highway, the shift returned, immediate, heavy. Breathing filled the car, louder now, ragged and harsh. I gripped the wheel, fighting the urge to scream. Then, in the rearview, the figure leaned forward, closer this time. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out. My radio clicked on by itself, crackling with static and shaping into words, my words. Don't stop. Tears blurred my vision. I sped down the road, desperate to escape. The figure leaned closer, closer, until I felt the weight of its breath against my neck. My skin crawled, every nerve screaming to get out. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I bolted from the car without looking back, locked the doors, ran inside. But through the window, I saw it, sitting calmly in the back seat, waiting. Now it's there every night. I see its silhouette in the window when I pass by. Sometimes it leans closer, fogging the glass with its breath. Sometimes it just waits, patient, unblinking. I don't drive anymore. Haven't touched the car in days. But last night, lying in bed, I heard it. The faint sound of breathing. Slow, steady, coming from the backseat of my mind. I don't think it needs the car anymore. Subscribe to Halfway Dark before you look in your rearview mirror tonight. Some passengers never leave once they've been picked up. I answered a phone call from myself. The phone rang at 2:14 in the morning, dragging me out of a half-sleep I didn't realize I'd fallen into. The sound felt wrong in the silence of the night, echoing through the dark room like it didn't belong. When I rolled over to check, my stomach turned. The glowing number on the screen was my own. I stared at it, confused, waiting for it to stop, but the ringing just went on and on. It was my exact phone number, the same digits I'd memorized years ago, flashing insistently on the screen like a cruel trick. Against every instinct, I answered. My hand was trembling before the call even connected. There was static at first, a heavy crackling that seemed to eat the silence around me. Then, buried in the distortion, I heard it. A voice, my own voice. I froze because it wasn't just similar. It was identical. The cadence, the tone, even the slight rasp in my throat. But it was crying. "Don't open the door," the voice hissed, breaking through the static with ragged urgency. "No matter what you hear, don't open it." I sat upright in bed, heart hammering. My room was pitch dark, the hallway outside just a strip of deeper blackness. The only sound was my own breathing, until the knocking started. 3 sharp, deliberate raps against wood. My voice on the phone whimpered, repeating the warning, faster now, more desperate. I swung my legs out of bed, feet hitting the cold floor, and tried to steady my breathing. The knocking came again, heavier this time. My throat tightened as I realized it wasn't coming from the front door at all. It was closer. It was at the end of the hallway, by my bedroom door. My phone self spoke again, words breaking under sobs. "It's already inside." I clutched the phone tighter, whispering back, "What do you mean?" But all I got was a strangled reply. "Don't let it see you. Don't let it know you're awake." The knocking stopped. Silence pressed in, so deep that every small sound, my pulse in my ears, the rustle of sheets behind me, felt unbearable. Then faintly, the floorboards creaked outside my door. Slow, dragging footsteps moved across the hallway, the wood groaning under each step. I pressed myself against the wall, phone trembling in my hand, praying it would keep me hidden somehow. I could still hear myself crying softly on the other end, whispering, "Hide, please, just hide." Summoning what little courage I had, I crept toward the kitchen, keeping to the darkest edges of the room. Every shadow seemed thicker than it should be, every corner alive with the possibility of movement. I slid behind the counter and crouched, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then, slowly, something scraped against the wall, a deliberate drag of nails or fingertips, moving along the hallway toward me. My chest burned as I held my breath, afraid even the faintest sound would draw it closer. I peeked over the counter, and my heart seemed to stop altogether. In the faint light from the street lamp outside, a figure stood in the living room. It was tall, its posture slouched in an almost unnatural curve. And when it turned, I saw my own face. It wasn't like looking in a mirror. It was wrong. The smile stretched too wide, lips pulled back far enough that the skin seemed to strain. The eyes caught the dim light and reflected it back like glass. I gagged silently on my own breath. The thing raised a hand and waved, slow and deliberate, as if mocking me for being caught. My phone buzzed violently in my hand, my own voice screaming through the static. "Don't wave back. Don't you dare wave back." The figure tilted its head, grin frozen in place, and lifted a phone to its ear, the exact same phone I was holding. The sound on the line shifted, and suddenly I wasn't hearing myself anymore. I was hearing the thing's distorted breathing, every rasp echoing directly into my ear. That's when I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't speaking to a future version of myself, or some parallel me trying to warn me. I'd been speaking to the thing already inside my house. The call cut off with a sharp click, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. My pulse thudded so loudly, I was sure it would hear. Then, without warning, the knocking started again. Not from one door, but from everywhere. The walls shook under the sound, the windows rattling in their frames, the floor vibrating beneath me. Every wall, every surface, pounded with identical rhythm like dozens of fists hammering all at once. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound bled through, crawling into my skull. The figure in the living room hadn't moved. It just stood there, head cocked, grinning wider, as if enjoying the chaos. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't make myself move. My legs wouldn't obey. Then impossibly, the phone lit up again. My number on the screen, glowing like a beacon. Against every instinct, I answered. My voice was there again, sobbing harder than before. "You let it see you," it whispered. "Now it knows. Now it won't stop." The figure's smile widened further, tearing at the edges of its face. My double lifted its free hand, pointing directly at the phone in my grip. The voice on the line whispered one final word. "Run." But I couldn't. My body refused to move, locked in place by that unnatural grin. The knocking grew louder, impossibly louder, until it sounded like the whole house was splintering apart. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I looked down at my phone, hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. The call had ended again, but the screen was still lit. A new notification blinked at the top. Missed call, my number, timestamp 2:14. The figure was gone. The living room stood empty, the front door still locked, the house quiet. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined everything. That exhaustion had twisted my senses into a nightmare. But the phone buzzed again, and my heart sank. Another call, my number. I didn't answer this time. I couldn't. I turned the phone off, shoved it under my pillow, and sat awake until dawn. But the relief was short-lived. Every night since, at exactly 2:14, the phone rings. Always the same number. Always my number. And no matter how many times I change it, reset it, or replace the phone entirely, it finds me. Sometimes I hear knocking along with the ring. Sometimes footsteps cross the hallway outside my room. And sometimes, when I glance into the living room, I see the silhouette of something tall, slouched, and smiling just beyond the shadows. It hasn't spoken again. Not yet. But I know one night I'll slip. I'll answer, and it will be waiting on the other end. So if you ever see your number glowing on your phone in the middle of the night, let it ring. No matter how curious you are, no matter how strong the urge, don't pick it up. Because once you do, it already knows where you are. And if you've stayed with me until now, you're already part of this story. You've opened the line. You've listened. Maybe your phone will ring tonight too. If you're still here, you're one of us now. Subscribe before the knocking reaches your walls.